we'll get started. We'll do the introduction and then we'll get started in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. On behalf of IMB and ISPMA, I welcome you all to the day 2 of the India Software Product Management Summit 2023. I hope all of you had a great time yesterday. And just like yesterday, we have a bunch of events lined up for you, very exciting events. So for the first session today, we have Professor Tony Wasserman joining with us remotely. Professor Tony Wasserman is teaching software product management at Carnegie Mellon University's Silicon Valley campus. At CMU, Professor Wasserman created the Center for Open Source Investigation, which serves as a focus for his research on evaluation, adoption, and use of open source. Previously, Professor Wasserman was the founder and CEO of Interactive Development Environments, one of the first 100 .coms, which created the innovative multi-user platform for software through pictures, and was among the first to include open source in a commercial software product. Over to you, Professor Wasserman.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I'm sorry I could not be there with you in person. It's been more than 3 years since I've been in India, so I'm looking forward to the time when I can come back and join in person. But for now, here I am in San Francisco. While you have breakfast, I had my dinner. So this actually 13.5-hour time difference works pretty well. So I'm going to try to talk this morning a little bit about how startups do product management, or whether they in fact do product management. So we need to talk about a couple of definitions as we get into this, and we'll try to be quick. So the first question is, what's a startup? And there's a book that I like by Steve Blank and Bob Dorff called The Startup Owner's Manual. And in that book, Steve writes, a startup is an organization formed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. In other words, when you start your company, the idea is that you can find some recurring source of revenue and make the amount of revenue be greater than the expenses. It seems very straightforward, but of course, those of you who've worked in small software startups know that it's not as easy as it sounds. So when we talk about a business model, we describe how a company makes money, how it gets users, and how it grows traffic. So when we talk about Google, for example, which certainly is not a startup, but which once was, they make money by selling advertising. And almost all of their money comes from that. And so when we think about startups, they come in different sizes and levels of maturity. Beyond that, every company that's out there was once a startup. It might have been a startup a long time ago, or like Facebook, Meta, excuse me. It was brand new in 2004, and Google was brand new in 1998. So these companies are young by international standards, but they're well beyond their startup stage because they have thousands and thousands of employees. They have billions of dollars in revenue. So we could hardly think of them as a startup, although many of these established companies like to think of themselves as being a startup, because that tries to keep the energy of startups alive, even when the pace of innovation slows down and when sometimes they get to be too big to move swiftly. But I'm really more interested in smaller startups. And in fact, most of the startups that I work with through accelerators and elsewhere is that they're still developing the first version of their product or service. And in fact, they haven't, the first product that they make available to their customers doesn't always have all the features that they wanted to have in their first version. There's a photo editing product that I like, and just today I was able to download what they call version 1.2.4. Well, I think it's about the 15th version of the product since it was first brought to market back in November. And they, I think, now are getting to the stage where their product has most, if not all, of the features that they had originally planned for the product. Another thing about a startup that's important is that it has fewer resources than it needs to do everything that it wants to do. So fewer people, less time, less money, and so something has to give. They can't do everything that they'd want to do. And, we know that's true, not just for startups, but also for more established companies as well. Sometimes you'll have a company that's working on several different projects or products, and senior management in those companies says, nah, we're going to kill this project. Happens all the time. In fact, we've seen a lot of it in Silicon Valley over the past few months because companies have suddenly gotten very concerned about profitability and working efficiently. And so some of the products and projects that were underway, top management said, no, we don't have the resources to do this. We don't have the money to do this. So this issue is not one that's just for startups, but it strikes particularly hard at startups, particularly when they don't have much of an investment. So what you can see is that startups go through different stages. We have these early stage startups, and they really have very few people. Maybe they meet in a coffee shop all together during the day, or they meet over Zoom, as we are, during the day, and they run their business that way. They don't have any external funding, so they may not be paying salaries. They don't yet have a product in the market. Where do they get their money? Well, sometimes they use their credit cards and take as much credit as they can. Sometimes they use what I call the bank of mom and dad, who support them. So eventually they get to the first release of their product. And this is often called the minimal viable product. It's not a name that I like very much, but what it means is that they have something to offer customers. And often they have some kind of a initial round of investment, a seed round. Not a lot of money, but enough that they can pay a little bit, and they can pay for their web hosting, and they can be around for a few months before they need to raise more money. The features that are in an MVP depend, because if they're bringing out a product that's not like anything else, then they can bring it out very early when it just has a handful of its features. But if they're bringing out a product in a market space where there are already a lot of competitors, minimal is often too minimal, because people will take a look at this very early stage product and they'll say, nah, it doesn't do what I need it to do. And they won't come back. So on some of these competitive marketplaces, they have to wait a little longer to be able to bring out a minimal product. But what they're trying to do, of course, is to figure out their business model and to find some early customers, because once you have customers, you have a much better chance of getting people to invest in your business. Of course, investors run the whole range too. Some investors are in a position and like to invest in companies at the very earliest stages. So they're really investing in the people who are starting the startup rather than in the merit of the product, which has not yet been built. Other investors are much more conservative and want to see something out there before they invest. And of course, venture funding, larger amounts of money, really don't come until you are able to demonstrate a business model that works. But after you get your minimal product out there, maybe you are able to get some seed investment, and you can use that for marketing and generating awareness of your company and maybe hiring a few people. So you go through these phases. And at the end, of course, you either keep on growing or you have a successful exit, by which I mean that you sell your company to somebody else, or in rare occasions, you have a public offering of your company, or more likely you fail. It's kind of a depressing thought. I've been teaching this year a course, a series of courses on product definition and validation and requirements and software product strategy. And as much as I like my students, of the 10 projects that we saw through to this stage, maybe 2 of them have a good chance of surviving if they were to continue. So, failure is the most common, though, of course, not the preferred thing. So how do we get from this really early stage where everybody is, together and then to the stage where you either keep on growing or you shut down the business? The way we do that, much of it, is through product management. So when we talk about product management, for me, in one sentence, it's just the idea that we're trying to define and deliver products that meet customers' needs. And there are a lot of ways to do that. We certainly need to find out what the customer's needs are, and we need to figure out what it takes to build those, and we need to figure out which of the various things that customers want are the most critical, both in terms of the customer's needs and in terms of the marketplace and the competitive space. So if we think about product management in a larger company, there's a long list, and really I only put 8 things here. If you go and you look at the material produced by SSPM, you'll see that there's an even longer list of things that constitute product management. But, you're trying to prioritize the market and the customer requirements, come up with a product vision, create product roadmaps, talk to stakeholders who are potential users, potential investors, your own employees, etc. You're trying to understand the customer feedback. And of course, you're trying to build the business model to figure out what works. Okay, great. Well, the fact is that a small company can't do all of those things. It's a lot to ask. Some things are done by the team. You wouldn't start the company if you didn't have a vision for some kind of a product or service. You have to make some decisions about what product features are the most critical to put out there. And you need to create a basic roadmap. Now, how far out is your roadmap going to go? Well, not very far. It's not like you have a 5-year plan for your product. If you're lucky, you say, all right, we can see that we want to have an initial version that we're going to make available to customers. And we're probably going to use some kind of an agile project development process. And what that means is that we're going to try to release our product early and often. We're maybe going to use a process like Scrum, where we do a series of sprints, and every 2 weeks we have something that's a little further along. And at some point we decide that we're going to make that available. But we can't do it all. You go out and you start to talk to customers, fine. Potential customers, users, people who have the problem. You do these interviews. Well, as a tiny company, you can't do hundreds of interviews. You might be able to do an online survey if you can get enough people to respond. You might be able to do some in-person interviews. But if you're a big multinational company and you're going to try to bring out a product that has potential for millions and millions of dollars in sales, you're going to spend a lot of time talking to potential customers. And one of the things we know is that not all consumer products, let's not worry about software for the moment, not all consumer products succeed. If you go into one of these stores, maybe you have a 99 rupee store, which sells products at that price. Well, a lot of the products that are sold at a 99 rupee store, what we call a dollar store, so it's about the same. Actually, there are items are $1.25 in the dollar store, so it's almost exactly the same. A lot of the products you'll find there are failed products. Okay? The manufacturer couldn't sell enough of them, sold them off for nothing, and now they're being sold in these stores with cheap prices. All right. Anyway, so some of the things that we want to do as a small company, we can't do as much as we'd like. We want to do some kind of market analysis. We want to create some personas, but we can't have a full set the way we would if we had multiple product managers and technical product managers, the way that you see in more established companies. And some of these things we just skip in the very early stages. It's hard to build a revenue model. Think about it. Google had no revenue model. Facebook had no revenue model. And they went, both of them, for years with no revenue. Yet they managed to be among the most successful and largest companies out there. The other thing that happens in a small company is this. Everyone wears many hats. No, I didn't draw that. I used generative AI, DALL-E to be precise, to generate this image, which is not quite perfect, but you get the idea. Everybody wears many hats. So when you talk about product management in a startup, well, the team effort is led by the founder, because the founder probably is the person who had that idea. And it's based on some kind of real world problem. And what you try to do is you see if you can create a potential solution that helps address that problem. And lots of products that we see and use today that are quite new are examples of that. Airbnb is an example of a service that's all over the world, because the people who founded the company didn't want to pay hotel rates. They knew that people went from place to place, and they did couch surfing. So that turned out, of course, to be a really good idea, one that many, many people had. There are any number of examples like that. And the idea came from the founders themselves, problems that they had. So they wanted to identify features for the initial version of their product. And as with many of these kinds of products and services, what happens? You pick a subset of the features that you want. Maybe you pick a small geography. I mean, if you have Airbnb, you can't go worldwide on day one. So you can limit yourself to maybe the Delhi area or to the San Francisco Bay Area or to some country. And this helps you figure out what's going to be in the first version. And then you go on with this. One of the things for those of you who come from a software engineering background, as I do, you'll notice that the product management process is similar in many ways to software processes, that you look at all these key product process areas, and if you look at what the Software Engineering Institute proposes, they have 22 key process areas. Well, no startup is going to do that. They're going to do like 3. And the same is true for us with product management. We're going to find a small number of the processes or the product management steps that we're going to be able to do when we're small. And as we go, we'll try to do more. Okay, so where does that leave us? In our small company, by which I mean a real early stage startup, 10 people or so, the decision-making is informal. A lot of people are involved in the decision. There was no extensive analytics done to determine things. Companies go out and they guess what's going to work best and what people want and maybe what they want because it's a problem that they have. And if they guess wrong, well, they end up in the failure column. And if they guess right, then they're going to grow and raise money and have more success and add to what they do around product management. And what happens, of course, is that product management becomes more formal over time, because in your early stage startup, you probably don't have somebody who has the title of product manager. That comes later as you build out your team. So as you go forward, of course, then the product management process, or maybe your first product manager, does what product managers do in all kinds of companies, which is be the go-between between engineering and marketing and senior management and the voice of the customer, so that you're pulled in all these different directions. You have lots of responsibility and no authority. So with that, my talks always end with a photo, and this is one of the world famous Golden Gate Bridge. But most people who take photos of the Golden Gate Bridge do so from the other side of the bridge, that is inside the bay, more in San Francisco. Where I took this from is actually still in San Francisco, but that's the ocean in front of us, not San Francisco Bay. So nice clear day. And with that, let me stop. And that gives us some time for some questions and answers. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Tony? Anyone wants to ask? Yes, please. Mike.
Professor, I'm Ramesh from Nokia. It's a very nice session. So the last summary was, I could relate it more. And within my company, I'm playing the role of a product manager for a new product, which is run like a startup. And initially it didn't have a product manager role as such, but over the period of time, we assumed the responsibility of product managers. And as you mentioned, so we assumed the role of product manager over a time and with less authority. So it's kind of R&D led organization or engineering led organization, or engineering led product than a product led product. So my question is, how do we navigate these influence with less authority? Because we are the one facing the sales, we are the one facing marketing, and we are the one facing customers. But then we are required to convince the R&D engineering, like these are the requirements. But as we know, like R&Ds are mostly technology driven rather than customer requirements driven. So I'm facing a challenge. How to
Yes, it is. That's
important, but the customer requirements are important. Thank you.
okay, good. Thank you. So a lot of startups, of course, are founded by technical founders because they want to just build something quickly and get it out there. And so those technical founders don't know it, but they are in fact the product managers. They are bringing things to market. But what happens over time is that the people who are in charge have to decide what they're going to do. Do they want to lead the product development? Do they want to work directly with the customers? Or do they want to maybe bring in somebody who is a technical product manager who maybe has some of both? The product sequence that I teach is really most of the students who come through it want to become product managers, and they come with computer science or software engineering degrees. So they decided they don't want to spend the rest of their lives writing code. And so as a result, the product management and the external facing piece of it is important. There's a cultural piece here, of course. Nokia, of course, has a long history as a consumer company back in the middle of the 20th century before they threw out everything and decided on mobile phones. So you have a company that has a technical heritage, and they're going to be different than a company that makes soap bars and deodorants, which has a non-technical heritage and has a different understanding of what a product manager does. So, you want people to do things that they like doing. You need responsibility for all these different things, but not every company fits into the same little hole. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Any other question? Yes, please.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session. It was very informative. My question goes around the topic of documentation. So typically when people are wearing multiple hats and everyone doing lots of things in a startup, out there documentation somehow seems to suffer pretty badly. And then later on, maybe 6 months, 8 months down the lane, why did we do this? What was the reason behind taking such a decision? Nothing gets documented. So is there any anything that you can share to keep a tab on what is being done, documenting what needs to be done?
Yeah, well, documentation. I, of course, as Professor Sadagopan mentioned, I work on open source also, and it too has the problem of documentation, that there's inadequate documentation for the code itself. But when you do interviews and you define personas, you actually end up with artifacts, whether it's a recording or whether it's the Q&A from an interview. You do get at least some background as to why you did what you did. So it's not zero. But one of the things that I think is going to happen is the artificial intelligence and the chat GPT kind of technology means that you're not going to have to sit at the keyboard and type in all the documentation. You're going to be able to speak the documentation, at least from the product feature side. And maybe that's going to get us a little more documentation and a little more complete documentation than we did in the past. But I think you're right. I mean, nobody puts documentation as the first thing on their list of things to do.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions anyone wants to ask? Perfect. I think, Mr. Tony, thanks so much for the session. And let's give it and we want to take a picture with you on the background. So we'll just we'll get some of the folks. So just yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Tony,
Good.
we are taking a picture.
Yeah.
You are the background. This is good for confidence record. Tony, you are larger than life for us. Good.
All right. Get the whole team.
Yeah, just take a picture. Nice. Yeah. Okay, you want us here? Okay. You want us here? Okay. Okay, fine. Okay. We listen to the photograph. Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. You take interest in German? We are switching across the timeline.
Seeing our back.
Yeah, because the Photoshop is real time.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So I'll
Thank-
look forward to getting the recording and seeing the pictures.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all very
Yes, if you want, you can continue to stay for the next sessions. But thanks so much for doing the session to us.
great. Thank you.
So the next session is going to be by Mr. Naveen Tiwari. Naveen, are you on Zoom?
I am.
Hi, Naveen. Hi. Thanks for joining. So we are here at IMB and we are going to have your session. So let's have a brief introduction and we can have you talk, Naveen. One
Yep.
second.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Naveen Tiwari, CEO and founder of InMobi Group, to deliver the keynote address on product growth, challenges, and insights. Mr. Naveen is an alumnus of IIT Kanpur and Harvard Business School. Naveen founded InMobi in 2008 after a brief stint at McKinsey. InMobi was India's first unicorn and is now one of the world's leading advertising platforms. Naveen is a strong proponent of Indian entrepreneurship, having mentored and supported over 60 young technology companies, personally or via InMobi. The impact of InMobi Mafia on the India's startup ecosystem cannot be understated. He has invested in several startups such as Razorpay, Nestaway, Springboard, Metal, Club, Factors.ai, Bright Money, Bombay Canteen, and more. He has also served as the board member at Paytm. I welcome you, sir.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be speaking at the SPM Summit. Before I begin, I must thank Professor Gopan and Professor Krishnan for inviting me here. It's a great platform, and it's always a privilege to actually come in and speak here. Apologies that I could not be there in person, despite being despite living in Bangalore. I'm not in town and not in the country today. But on a lighter note, we're talking about product and product management. And one of the big things about product management is you need to know your customer and you need to know your user. And as I give this speech, actually, I don't see who I'm speaking to. So this is actually going to be the antithesis of what a product management may look like, because I'm going to speak to people without knowing who I'm speaking with. So we're going to try and pull this off. Typically, from a product management point of view, that's not the best thing to do. You should know your customer and your user quite well. But nonetheless, I think it's as I said, my vantage point of speaking today is not as much as a product manager, but as somebody who loves products. And maybe earlier in my life, I was building products myself. But today, across my companies, I manage maybe a few hundred product managers. So my vantage point may not be as as detailed and as crisp as many others, but I'll give you a different perspective on, on product development in general, and especially from an India perspective on how I think about product development, broadly speaking. So I have three big points that I want to talk about, and then I'll open it up for, for conversations. I think the first, is the first point is more around the game plan for India. I'm a very proud Indian, and I take that pride not lightly. And 2008, when we started off, India was known for being an amazing services organization, services country which was basically had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions, who were providing services, the back-end services to the world. We were probably the first product company out of India that actually tried to not only build products for India, but build it for the globe. And that was not easy at that point of time. It was not easy because you would go out and talk about the product and you would not get, you would not be heard, because people would ask me the address and I would not have a Silicon Valley address. Unfortunately, I would not say I am on the University Avenue. I would be in San Francisco or something like that. And unfortunately, that played a big role in the early parts of our life. I think the world has changed since then. And I think there is a good enough recognition of the products that have been built across the globe. I take a lot of pride in the fact that, probably 15 years ago to now, there is a huge amount of change in the way, not only in the fact that we can build great products as a country. I think there is also a lot of confidence within our own people that we can build great products. It's no more about, it's no more that, oh, do we know how to build great products? I think we always had the technical know-how. I think the product know-how, and especially with, organizations like the ones that you're participating in right now, really help build out the product capability. Now, why is it that that's so important? Is because, at some level, over the last 15 years, we felt a lot of pride, by the way, in building out a product platform, product company out of India. It was hard in the beginning. I would tell you stories and stories of how hard it was, because, we were asked, we would get through a whole pitch and everybody would be willing to buy a product, except when the address was asked. And I've had so many instances where that has happened, but in the last 10 years or so, it's never happened. And so I feel a lot of pride in that. But that was the story about a decade ago. What are we really talking about now? If you think about India today, what has really changed? There are a few things that have really, really changed about India. I think one, we've gone through the biggest digital migration that any country has ever gone through. Maybe China has had similar digital migration, but I think the pace at which our digital migration has happened, no other country at that scale has actually ever taken place. So what does that mean? It means 10 years ago to now, we are a completely different country. We are a digital country. We're a digital native. Yet, in addition to that, our population is such that we are only going to be more and more digital. So that's a great phenomena that we are actually sitting on. Now, what does that mean? It means we have seen most amount of products getting created for our country, for our problems, by our people, that are basically solving those problems. Amazing set of things have happened. A lot of money has flown in. All of those things are written in the media, so that looks all great. We're creating some phenomenal products. Now, what is the challenge? The challenge is simple. There is one big challenge. Our country does not have the depth to support those business models today. We do not have the economic strength of saying you can build a digital product and that can become a multi-billion-dollar product. For example, in America, if you were to build a company with, dog walking technology, God forsaken, that could even get to be multi-billion-dollar company. Because that shows the depth of the market. Unfortunately, we do not carry that level of depth of the market. So there is a set of people who think that that's a challenge. So therefore, we should not go over aggressive about it. But like every, tough situation has a great outcome or has a great opportunity attached to it. I think there's a great opportunity attached to it. The great opportunity is, I think there is an opportunity for India to build the products for the world, write the software for the world, not as a backend, but as a product. Now, why is that possible? that is possible because you're actually living in the biggest, digital playground of the world that's open. China used to be that playground, it's closed. So therefore, you actually are the biggest playground in the world where you can test out your digital products, both consumer and enterprise, throw them out there in India, build them for India, and then take them global. Why is that a possibility? Well, a few things have changed in the last many years. One, I think what's really changed is the youth of today, unlike the youth of about 20, 30 years ago, are not that different between the products that they use globally versus the products that they use today in India. For example, my children, when they go to America, they actually just blend in like 5 minutes. The reason is they consume the same content, they consume the same applications, they live the similar world, just in a different geography. So there is a huge connect that has happened because of internet, of content that is just so similar, of habits that are so similar, of taste that are all starting to just become, there is a homogeneity in that flavor. The challenge is we still live in the notion that the worlds are very, very different. Now, if you look at the last many years in the US, the last big consumer application that actually took off in America was Snap. And that was like 10 years ago. In the last 10 years, all the large consumer applications that have actually scaled up in America are actually scaled up from Asian. Like the biggest one right now is TikTok. So that's just taken off. And you will see more and more of those taking off. Now, why is that happening? The reason that's happening is because you have a massive playground at where the cost of testing out your products is much cheaper. So you can actually launch a product in Asian markets, specifically in India, test your product out. You will have 10 million to 100 million people use your product. There is no better way to refine your product, to make it amazing, when you have 100 million people use it. And then you actually scale it globally. Same is true for enterprise products. I've seen so many enterprise platform companies, including us, who built the first set of platforms in India and then took them out. As you take them out and you take them out into the world, you have a perfect product go out. Versus your competition is actually trying to basically launch these products in the developed markets in itself. When you launch a product in developed market in itself, it's very costly. So the amount of iterations you can run on a product that you've launched in the US, like directly in the US, both enterprise and consumer are limited because it takes that much of cost. Like a cost of testing out a product in front of consumers here is probably less than $1. It's $10, if anything, in the US. So therefore, you're talking about 10:1 ratio. Go back 20 years, the cost of backend services in India, the advantage used to be, 4:1 or 5:1. But actually, the cost of product development in India is 10:1. And we actually have a bigger playground, much bigger playground, and a much bigger, ability to build something that can actually totally change this. Now, us as a company, we have launched all of our products first in India. Our playbook is very simple. The India playbook for us is, build the product in India, test it out in India, iterate till it becomes successful, and then scale globally. And the idea is very simple. The idea is, if you scale these products globally, you take the advantage of a global economics, unit economics, and you take the advantage of testing out the product in India. Excuse me. And that also then creates a new kind of business model for Indian companies. The Indian companies which are struggling today, as you launch these digital internet companies in India, the thing that you're struggling with today is these limited size of the market. You actually change the paradigm, and suddenly the same company with same product, with similar go-to-market, similar product development opportunity, you now actually have created for yourself a 5x larger market opportunity and therefore a bigger company possibility. So I somewhere think, we believe that as InMobi, we started the first product, revolution in India I think there's a much bigger revolution of building software from India for the globe, building products from India for the globe at mass is a possibility. And I think we can build the software for the world. So I think that's point number one that I really wanted to, talk about. Point number two that I want to talk about is product vision. And the big point there, at least for me, is we need to be very ambitious when you're building a product. You need to be ambitious, you need to be bold, and you need to be uncompromising in the vision that you put out for your product. Ability to actually have a bold enough vision is important, because many a times I think we will struggle. The effort required to build a product is very similar. But I think we all, especially in India, we all get really bogged down by the incrementality versus the exponential capability of building a product. Now, building an incremental product is fine. I think companies do that, people do this. But if you truly, truly want to create something different, you might want to essentially go ahead and build a large scale platform. Now, capital is a great enabler, but capital does not allow you to create an ambitious product. Capital actually gives you an ability to, it also does not give you the ability to create great products. It gives you a false sense of that you've built a product that has a moat. And I think we need to be very careful about that. The ability for people to essentially build out something which is bold and ambitious is important. If you're a great product leader, and there are so many of them across the world, they become great not because they're great product execution guys. Of course they are. They become great because they have had the ability to have a bold vision out there. If you link it back to my first point, our country has enough and more problems. They're not going to be solved through non-technical solutions. They're going to be solved through technical solutions. But in order to solve them through technical solutions, we need to have a massive vision, a bold vision to try and solve for them. You have to really pick a problem area and not just say, okay, how am I going to make it a little better, a little more efficient? The opportunity for India and the opportunity for the world is, how can I pick that problem and totally change the dimension of it? That opportunity to be able to think of this way, a completely ambitious plan, requires you to be dogmatic. I think we struggle. Dogmatism, the challenge with dogmatism, and if you're a product manager versus a product leader, that's the big distinction you got to make. Because if you're a product leader on your product vision, there'll be a lot more naysayers. A lot more people will come up and say, that's not going to happen. It's just too, we don't know this. And there'll be a lot of smart things that you'll be told. For example, we don't know what the consumer reaction would be. Hey, so why don't we launch something like this and then figure out a way to get there? Incrementally, you are never going to get to build a great product. You always have to be able to put something out there and then go figure out how that changes. And I think we, as a country which is going to try and solve big problems, the opportunity is in front of us, because very soon you're going to essentially have people who are going to come up and create that new product, and your product will actually be obsolete. In that moment, it becomes obsolete. So you have to figure out how you play the game very differently. And so the key question that you have to ask for yourself is, are you playing as a product leader? A, are you a product leader? Are you a product manager? B, are you playing to win, or are you playing to stay? And if you're playing to win, then you have to think about the world very, very differently. If you're playing to stay, yeah, you can get by with many, many things, around it. I'll give you one example and a story on that. It's more recent, and therefore I'll share that with you guys. About 4 or 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, we built a platform on the lock screen called Glance. And it was our attempt to essentially provide intelligence and computation power to the surfaces of any digital device. We were looking around the world and we could see millions of devices in the hands of people, but the surfaces of those devices were not intelligent. And we said, if the world is going to move towards artificial intelligence, the internet is going to be very easy, computation is going to sit on the cloud, then how can we not change the amount of intelligence and computation that sits on the surfaces of the devices, also known as the lock screen for a mobile phone or the front screen of a television? Why should those not be inactive? If you've seen the movie Minority Report, that was the inspiration behind it. To say the surfaces of any device should be far more intelligent. Now, we said this and we started to work on this, but almost everybody refuted that we could pull this off. It's not hard to refute the fact that we're going to try and build intelligence into the surfaces. It's a very easy thing to refute because it is hard and it is not seen before. It's not something that can actually be fathomed also. Long story short, we do launch the platform. We launch it in India. We bring that platform out. While the vision was large, in order to bring it out the first time, I would say it was 1/100th of what it should be in the first version of it. But that was fine. The vision was not the first version of the product coming out versus what the vision was. That's okay, because we were always going to move towards that big play. And we have incrementally moved our way up on the amount of intelligence that the surfaces will have. And today, we have roughly about 400 million phones in the world that actually carry the Glance operating system that make the surfaces intelligent. We have about 200 million of them in India, about another 200 million of them in Southeast Asia. Kind of repeating the playbook that I referred to say, hey, we're going to launch these in this part of the world. Next month, I think in the month of, it's March. In the month of April and May, we launched this platform in the US. So the US is, for the first time, is actually going to have a Glance platform which actually makes the surfaces intelligent. No other company in the world actually does this today. No other company. And because no other company does this, Google, which owns Android, actually invested into us to say, hey, we have no clue what you're trying to do. It seems really cool, but you're doing this on my own devices. So we might as well participate with you, invest into you. And so Sundar Pichai himself led the deal, made the investment into into Glance, and off we go. And hopefully our aim is very simple. We want to be, in the next 2 years, we want to make 1 billion devices, the surfaces of 1 billion devices, intelligent and computation ready. Now, we started off this journey 5 years ago. We never relented on the vision. We stayed with it. It was bold. Maybe almost every person that we spoke with, barring the 10 people who were willing to go out in the corner of our company and say, okay, we're going to be held up in a room and start to work on this. Barring those 10 people, every other person I knew disagreed with their vision. But it was fun because we are now going to recreate and change the world and the way every one of us uses our phone. That was the vision. Hopefully we'll make it happen. There is some way to go, but it was at least bold enough to say we're going to change the world with it. So we enjoyed it. We enjoyed the process. We made a lot of mistakes, but we never gave up on the vision. And that was important to us. So that's the thing that I say, we were playing to win, I think. We may lose in it, but we were playing to win. We certainly were not playing to stay in the game. And I think people who were part of this, whether they were technical people, whether they were product people, designers, or business people, they, in my view, were product visionaries and product leaders. They could imagine a product, work on it, and had the ability to go after it. And to me, that ability to go after is really, really important. So, today, I don't have one company. I ended up having two companies with very large opportunities, because within the first company, we created the second one, and that's actually becoming significantly larger than the first one. So it's not a bad place to be at, where your first product creation, as you go to the next product creation, actually is bigger than the first one. And so it's fine. It's a great place to be at least shows that we might have learned a thing or two about product creation and product development. So that's point number 2 that I wanted to, share and talk about. Point number 3 that I want to talk about is very, very important, and it depends on which environment and where you work and what you do. And that's about, we always, as product leaders, think about what's the moat for our product. The more time I've spent looking at moats, there used to be this whole thesis that capital is a moat. Yeah, it is. It's a short-term moat. We used to think about moats where we would like lock in a customer and stuff. Yeah, that's a moat. Don't get me wrong. It's a nice moat to have. But if I take a slightly longer cycle, and I don't mean longer like 10 years or something. No, I mean like 3 years. If I take a longer cycle on product, the technological cycles have changed. The technological cycles used to be, 5 to 10 years earlier. They have shrunk. The technological evolution cycles are probably like 2 to 3 years now, like on the higher end. So you build a product in 2 to 3 years, swear to God, you're going to be out of it. Like somebody else is going to come in and create a better product and is going to create something bigger and better than yours. So you're out of the business in some shape and form, or you'll struggle to essentially stay in the business. So the only thing that I've been able to figure out, and I could be totally wrong in this, is you have to figure out that I've only figured out that the only moat in our business is constant innovation. Now, I have 2 large companies. Innovation used to sound a thing that is only to be done by startups. That to earlier stage startups, if you're a Series A company, you're like amazing at it. You're seen to be amazing at it. You have to be, by the way. That's the only reason for you to exist, is to essentially do like a phenomenal innovation. And so I think the big thesis that we are trying, and I would say we have not succeeded completely, but we are trying, is this whole thing about innovation at scale. And there are some companies that do a phenomenal job at it. Like Amazon is an amazing example of innovation at scale. Google used to be an amazing example, maybe still is somewhat of innovation at scale. There are a bunch of these companies that have really figured it out. Now, what does innovation at scale mean? It means you're innovating, which means you are essentially, you have the ability to incubate ideas, scale them, make them part of the system and organization, and then, have that happen. But the thing is, which is important, is innovation at scale, if seen as something that is done in a corner, then it doesn't work. So what does that even mean? And I think, as I said, I don't have a full answer on this, but the thing that I'm at least trying to get to is innovation at scale is a culture, and it's a culture problem. You need to have people who can live in 2 worlds, a world and 2 worlds at the same time. A world where they are okay with ambiguity, they're okay with chaos, they're okay in thinking about stuff that can just change quickly, they're iterating very rapidly, they're innovating. In the same time, they're also setting up systems, processes, setups that are required for scaling their organization. This constant innovation at scale is not a concept, it's a culture, which means that at any point of time, you are paranoid about existence, and you are maniacal about scaling. If you combine those two principles together, you probably create a culture which is always saying, my product will become obsolete in 3 years. So what am I doing to essentially make it? But you're also saying, how can my product scale and give me the biggest, access to a customer base of market share, etc. And I think I've struggled to really find a lot of people in the world who could do this. People who actually end up doing this become CEOs of companies, by the way, truly speaking, because CEOs, one of the biggest jobs for a CEO is to be able to figure this out. Or they become amazing product visionaries, which is nothing but, in the technical world, in the technological world, in the digital world that we live in, that's what a CEO needs to be able to do, is to be a product visionary. And to me, at least what we are trying to do at InMobi is we are trying to create this culture where we have not just, 1 people or 5 people, but probably 100 people, hundreds of people who are thinking like a product visionary, who have this concept of innovation at scale and are trying to do this. And it's working somewhat for us, is what I would argue. As you guys probably would know, as part of InMobi, we created the InMobi ads business, which is the one that we started off with. We are one of the top 10 ads platform. We constantly innovate in that business. As part of our company, we created Glance, which is now becoming a category of its own in the form of, operating system for surfaces. It'll be on 1 billion phones. It'll be on 100 million televisions soon. It's a category of its own. We created another platform called Reposo, which is a creator-led platform. We are innovating on gaming. So we are really trying to do these 3 or 4 things in our world. They are all connected by this culture of innovation at scale, a thesis of constant evolution, because when the world becomes really technically savvy, the only way for you to survive is to constantly innovate, constantly evolve. And so to me, that's become the big thing of innovation at scale. It also, by the way, the principle that I typically use is that good enough is probably the biggest enemy of great. We want to create a great company. And therefore, at any point of time, if our product is good enough, we try to fight that in order to create something great. It creates a lot of chaos. It creates a lot of some bit of instability, but you need people and you need a culture which understands this instability to essentially be the biggest driver for growth for us. So those are the 3 things that I wanted to talk about. I think if I were to summarize, this is the time for our country where the game plan for India, we can actually build software for India. We need to have, big, bold, uncompromising product vision as a company, as a country, and as product visionaries. We need to essentially play to win and not play to just stay. And lastly, we need to figure out innovation at scale. Why? Because constant innovation is probably the only moat, and probably gives us the fact that, we cannot just be happy with good enough being the state of any company, of any product, because that's the greatest enemy for great. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for showing me the crowd in between. That's always useful, get a glimpse of the people that I was speaking with. But once again, thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute pleasure. And it was also a pleasure, Professor Wasserman, to hear you speak. A big fan of yours from a long period of time, as somebody who's in the product industry myself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Naveen. We're going to open up for 1 or 2 questions here from the audience. So anybody wants to ask a question to Naveen? Yeah, please. Are you able to see us now, Naveen?
Yes, yes, I can.
The audience? Okay, perfect.
Hey, hi, Naveen. Great insights.
I have a bird's eye view of the people.
Yeah. No, now you know the customer very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Naveen. So I have a question related to the first point that you mentioned that, even in the last one or so decade, India has transformed into a product-led country. And I think that is true in the context of most of the startups that we have who primarily operate in the Indian geography and cater to this market. But my question is more from the perspective of large enterprise organizations, which are primarily based out of, let's say, US market, and they majorly started with their R&D centers in India. And now, even though over the time they have transformed, or they have, started having their product leadership or other leadership teams based out of India, in my little experience that I have had in the product management, what I have observed is that even though we have product leadership here based out of India, it's very more from the perspective of implementational perspectives. So how do you navigate your way in terms of having more strategic exposure, having, being here in India? Because what I mean in terms of it is that, let's say small things such as whether it is product prioritization or product roadmap or product vision, like you mentioned, what I see is that the teams which are based out of US, because they primarily operate in the geography where the primary customers are and the primary product is, they have more say in terms of navigating the direction. So how do you, like, for example, I'm asking from my perspective that as a product manager for a company which is primarily operating in US, how do I navigate my way into it in order to be more, contributing strategically to the product direction?
If you honestly ask me, I think you should quit. There is no way you're going to be able to make that change in an organization which is actually, has its epicenter in the US by sitting in India. There is no way you're ever going to get even a remote chance of giving you a ability to actually play out your product capabilities. No, you're not going to get it. You will be told many things, but you will not get it. And it's not because the company does not want to do it, it's just wrong to give it to somebody who's not in the geography. You have to be close to the customer. Now, what you will be given is probably what you're saying is that you will be given a lot of, product, managing the life of a product. So you'll be managing the life of a product. You'll be managing the pathway. You'll be like, oh, incrementally, I need this feature and that feature. Why don't you go run that? And that is a demise of a product capability, if you truly ask me. Look, 15 years ago, probably 10 years ago, probably my answer would have been different because, the country didn't have enough of it. I think you should choose and figure out places where the epicenter of the product decision is India or wherever you are, or you shift to the US, by the way, doesn't matter. But you have to be at the place where the epicenter of decision is being made. And if you are at the epicenter where the decision is being made, then only you can actually come up with all the things that, we did talk about. Otherwise, you're just part of the wheel and you're going to have to do the paperwork. If you're happy doing the paperwork, great. But if you're not, and if you really want to create something, yeah, you got to figure something else out. By the way, having said this, there are companies who have now shifted some of their products. The large companies, they've shifted some of their products to India. Like Google Pay, for example, like the product is based out of India. Just giving one example, I'm pretty sure there are many, many more. So I think you have to then, if you want to stay in the large MNC, then you have to navigate your way to the right product. But if you just join them, then be ready to face this. Sorry, I was just direct.
That was awesome. Your question. One second now. We're getting a mic.
Thank you so much. My name is Samit Godbole, and my question is regarding about.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're cutting through a little bit, but go ahead.
Come here and speak.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Now
Okay.
it's better.
Is this better? So my question is related to your third point about innovation. What happens when you innovate? You bring up a new product, your new subscription service into the market, and then you have a competitor copying you. How do you out-innovate in such a scenario? We came up with a subscription system, we built it, we launched it, and had a few success with it. And then a competitor copied us. How do you navigate in such a marketplace?
Well, two things there, right? One, I think you said it yourself partly. If you created a product and somebody could copy, that means it was not really a great product. It must be a great service. But then you should have known this ahead of time. Like as a product leader, you probably know this ahead of time that this is exactly what's going to happen. Like if the fact that you got copied surprised you, then you really didn't think it through. Because if you launch this product, and this happens many times, if you launch a product and if that product essentially gets copied, then that's an issue one. So the question you have to ask is, hey, the product that I create, is it such that it cannot be copied easily? And if that's the case, then that's one part. But if it can be copied and you still go ahead and do it, then you go to the stage 2 of this. What is the stage 2? The stage 2 of this is, building a product is one part, getting distribution on this is part 2. So then you essentially think about what can I do in distribution where I can go create a lock-in. If you can create a lock-in on the distribution by being first to the market or doing some things which creates some level of network effects, or you get customers to buy in because it's a subscription product, maybe you run faster ahead of them and get that subscription to kick in so that customers are locked in and something of that nature. That's your second area of that's your second thing that you could do. And the third thing that you could potentially try and do is raise a lot of money. If you can raise a lot of money, you throw a lot of that money to buy your customers and get them. So hopefully that buys you a couple of years to improve the product or make it deep enough so that nobody else can come in and go after you. But if you truly think about this, if you link this, what you're effectively saying is, if you created a product and it got copied very quickly, on one hand, you went down this path of go-to-market where you're just trying to go and capture the market share and stay. But at the same time, you have to create another thread here, which is of innovation. The thread of innovation needs to be such that you're moving the product better and better and better. But you have to out-innovate your competition in that case, or create the delta between what the features you give and the product experience that you give versus somebody else so wide that there is at least 12 months to 18 months of delta between you and your next competition. If you can maintain that, then at all points of time, you'll always be winning. Great example of is probably Zoom, which is an amazing product. Of course, took off in pandemic, and then teams kind of slowly built it up. And there was no further innovation possible. Maybe, I don't know. But you now have teams which is significantly order of magnitude larger than probably Zoom is what I hear. I don't know the numbers. But these are examples where, I think you have to live across distribution and product innovation simultaneously.
That was awesome. I think we are kind of running out of time and kind of respect your time as well, Naveen. So we have Professor Sadagopan. Naveen just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Naveen. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So before we move on to the next session, I have a few announcements. Those who have not collected the ISPMA SPM startup framework posters are asked to collect them. And also the social media contest is still up and we'll be announcing the results by the end of the day. So go ahead and participate. All right. For the next session, I would like to invite Mr. Magnus Bilgren, lead Topagoni Thoughts, to deliver his presentation on speed layers. Mr. Bilgren is a fellow member of ISPMA and a high-tech product management equilibrist. He has worked and given product training in Europe, North America, and Asia for companies like ABB, IBM, Ericsson, Micronic, Alpha Label, Tetra Pak, Net Insight, and many more. Over 1,000 product managers have taken part in his trainings by Mr. Magnus. Over the years, he has driven product management in global firms and startups and founded one of Europe's leading product management companies. I welcome you, sir.
So can I get one of these on my? Take one of these. That's one.
This is what
Perfect. And this will work. Yeah, good. So thanks for having me. Well, first I would like to thank also with a lot of one of the reasons that I've decided to come here and bring my son, Ulla, to come here is to experience the ambition and the thoughts in India. And I think with Professor Sadakapan, Dr. Chowdhury yesterday, and also now Mr. Naveen Plenary, you all share and been sharing a lot of thoughts, and also in the discussions that we've been having, Hara. You shared so many thoughts that makes me so inspired and has evolved my thoughts on India radically in the future of India. That makes it makes me very happy to be here, but to invest this time. Now, what I would like to share now is actually connecting very much with the thoughts of Naveen Tamari. It's more of an operational way of thinking how to achieve a number of those things that he talked about, that we will work with a number of companies. I run both consultancy, and we also have a product show that we run every Tuesday on productbeats.com. So please join us there. I know some of you who's been to the Product Beats show. There's a few of you that's been there. Yeah, cool. So please join us on Tuesdays. Every single Tuesday, I think it's 1 p.m. on Indian time is when we have the product show. So I'm working with both with like really huge corporations, like Ericsson or Spotify and these multinational MNCs that are doing development all over the space, and also with Ericsson competing with you. But also with small startups and scalers that I've been helping to reach the market and go IPOs. And whenever we look at product management, there are opportunities absolutely everywhere. We know that. Everywhere we look, there's a new opportunity, a new market, a new segment, a new application. There's always a new thing around the corner that we can work with. Is there a problem with the sound? Is this one also on? Does it get an echo? Can we turn these off? Well, because I think it's both this and... Yeah. And there's opportunities absolutely everywhere. We know that in product space. But there's also there are a lot of opportunities absolutely everywhere. And when we look at them and we approach different types of product management problems and situations, we can go in so very many different directions. About 10 years ago, I was involved in an automotive project where it contained data, it contained applications, contained internal communications with field buses, IoT communication. It had a lot of different technologies involved to make it happen, to create that product. And it was just very difficult. And all of the different teams involved, were like hundreds of people involved in creating this in different teams. And there are very different settings for the technology. Some things move very quickly, other things move very fast. I didn't know at the time that I was on the verge to discover the speed layer approach to evolving products that are that involves lots of different technologies and moves at different speeds at the same time. But that's what we did at the time. And that has helped, for example, Dolby Atmos, that today has a 90% market share in the world for home entertainment solutions for sound. They've been using speed layers. We've been using Ericsson at different products. We've been helping InRiver, a company would say that went public or was sold last year for $360 million US. They've been using speed layers to evolve their product from being a startup to being sold for $360 million US. It's been helping Saab that does military technologies to evolve, and also civilian technology, to evolve radar systems for airport and airport systems. And with helping them to quadruple the profits in a rather short period of time. We've been helping startups to monetize on their technologies by applying the speed layer approach. The concept is not that difficult, and it almost goes back to what a previous speaker talked about, that we need to balance the mode, the long-term thinking, the vision, the ability to compete and be hard to copy and innovate while being customer obsessed and deliver on customer demands rapidly and being responsive and being fast. So I think so it's not that difficult of a thinking really, that we need to get a new view of time. So let's talk, I know there's a little bit of philosophy. I know you like that, Hara. To talk about philosophical thinking around what's time and how do we use time in our companies. Most of us, when we work with time and we go to wonderful schools and get our MBAs and evolve our thinking around time and strategic operations, strategic, tactical, and operational thinking, we kind of see time from a linear perspective. Strategy is always over here, right? It's always 3 years away. You create a strategy, where do you want to go in 3 years? It's something that's always further down the line. Operation is what we do today. And that's a problem, because we want to deliver, if you remember Mintzberg, strategy is a stream of actions. So that the strategy actually exists in the actions, not in the plans. The actions create the strategy. And we need to change this way of thinking, but because the problem is that this, I cannot point there. The problem is that these operations will always take the overhand of us. So what we want to do is to change the level of thinking. If you think Scrum, when we work with Scrum, what I think Scrum changed is actually our perspective of time. That we work in iterations. We don't work linear. We see time not as in what will happen in Q2, what will happen in Q3. With Scrum and Agile thinking, we think about what will we do in next iterations, and then we'll do the next iteration, and we think 3 weeks, 2 weeks, daily sprints. So we have changed the perspective of time with Scrum. That's good. But normally we say in Scrum, we normally have one sprint period, like daily sprints, weekly sprints, or whatever it might be. But what if we could actually have multiple sprints with different speeds working in parallel? Where we're in the long sprint, fast sprints, we work solving customer needs and problems quickly, being very responsive. And a long sprint where we evolve the moat, where we evolve our ability to compete, where we build our exclusive, sustainable vector of differentiation that allows us to differentiate over a long period of time and can defend our position for a long period of time. That's what speed layer is about. So let's look at this, because a little more of the situation that most of us are in. So of course we have tons of opportunities. At the same time, so I think we will become obsessed with problems. We want to solve problems. And also within our internal organization, there's always an enormous amount of problems that we need to solve. Customer problems, sales problems, process problems, and we have problems everywhere. And the organization and management is always stressed. We all know that. We want to increase deliveries, profits quickly. We'll have a limited amount of money. When are we delivering? When are we delivering? What's happening? And the speed is driving us faster and faster into a certain direction. And there's a risk with that speed that the short-term thinking eats long-term for breakfast. Normally, that the short-term activities and operations, they take the upper hand of everything that we do. And then we cannot evolve that mode. We cannot evolve that core thinking of our technologies that makes us compete in the long term. That's what we see. So there's a risk with the speed thinking that we get obsessed by solving customer needs today. But we must know customers, and we should focus on customers, but not only what they need today, but also on what they need tomorrow. Because we as product managers, we evolve products that are going to be used tomorrow, next month, 3 months from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now. We must be able to think long term. We must know the customer needs before the customer knows them themselves. So it's not enough just to respond to what they say. We must go under their skin to understand what they are looking for in the future. What's also happening with all of us working in tech space and software is that the complexity of every single product keeps increasing. Every new feature we add, every new line of code we add, every new process we integrate into the product creates complexity. And the problem is, this is a huge problem that when we talk about in large organizations, that the complexity drives sometimes product management into a very administrative role. In large, where you manage large complex products, that the administration of the different products that you get focused to administrate, you need to administrate the complexity, which makes it very, very difficult. One thing of doing it that Marty Kagan and with Inspire and the teams that's been evolving a lot, of course, is that we build small teams to manage the complexity within the teams and dividing it by organization. But then also we need to handle the complexity on top of all of that. But still, that's just the fact. The complexity is increasing. Then also, of course, we cannot even create a movie anymore without thinking about ecosystems. But everything relates to one another. Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, the Hulk, they're not even isolated products anymore. They're part of an ecosystem. And I think almost all of us work in the software space. When we create products, we always integrate within an ecosystem. Ecosystems are difficult. When they talk just about platforms and platform businesses, it takes time to build a platform business and to build the ecosystem. You cannot solve that in one daily sprint. If you can't do that, please tell me how. So ecosystem also makes it difficult. So what we see if we have all these things and we're just continuing to work as we normally do, with one sprint and one speed and doing everything, we see that we're missing a number of market opportunities because we haven't built the readiness to act when the opportunities arise, because we haven't been thinking long-term enough. The long-term thinking becomes difficult in some organizations, that we are focusing on deliveries and the short-term is the long-term thinking for breakfast. Organizational issues that we both want to have strategic thinking and position ourselves, and we spend time on being innovative. At the same time, we need to deliver, handling that. I think what Naveen called the organizational chaos. But it does become an organizational chaos and difficult. We get processes issues that processes are normally applied for a certain speed. If we look at Scrum, for example, wonderful for some type of, for a certain type of speed, but not for all speeds. And from a business perspective, we lose control because the business is hijacked by development issues, by short-term issues, and also with all of this complexity and everything, there are a lot of hidden organizational and administrative costs that we don't see from a management perspective that just eats up the budget, and we're not getting any results or not getting good enough results. Because these are some of the things that we've been seeing. So let's go into speed layers, and I'm thinking of what is then speed layers? How can this help us? So what we try to do when we work with speed layers, it's not a recipe. You cannot take speed layers and say, hey, let's go. It doesn't work. Well, it's a more of a mental model to approach this problem of a multi-speed product and embrace the fact that every single product has multiple speeds. So what we try to do is firstly to try to identify what's slow, what takes time, what should take time. If somebody's working with fintech products or health tech products, there are certain elements that we don't want to fail in. They don't deliver if it doesn't work, period. Don't. Test and test and test, make sure it works. It does take, some part will take time. And to be fast, the interesting thing, if you think about being fast, we have to embrace being slow. To be fast, we must be able to be slow, because otherwise, if you mix everything together with being fast and being slow together, the fast things goes too slow and the slow things goes too fast. It doesn't work out. So firstly, what we need to look like, what are there certain algorithms? Is something in the ecosystem? So when we're talking about the speed, we're not only talking about tech now, we're talking about on the product business side. Building the ecosystem might take time. If we're working with platforms or defining technologies, processes, like going back to what Naveen said, he talked about it takes time to build the processes and the structures. And we need to build the processes and structures while we're being fast. But that takes time. If we're working with some kind of defining technology, it's to collaborate. Michael McGrath has written one of the best books ever in product management, I think, from Product Strategies for High-Tech Companies, written in 2001. He was the founder of PRTM. He talks, they only did one single thing, identified the defining technology in companies that is impossible to copy, that allows them to copy over continuously, where and isolate, identify it, evolve it, invest in it, and build your moat around your defining technology. What is that defining technology that allows us to compete continuously? Testing, for example, is something that normally takes a lot of time for all of us to build testing infrastructure, testing models, doing testing. For a lot of companies, if you work in Nokia, you know. The amount of testing in the telecom, what is the cost? It's like 25, 30, 40% of the R&D? It's
More than R&D.
More than R&D, yeah. The amount of, and the structures and all the testing infrastructure is extremely expensive to build and takes a long time to evolve. So testing can also be, can in fact also be defining technology for companies. And also the operational model. So firstly, what we do is that we try to identify things that are slow. And then based on these, the problem with the slow things is that they're very hard to make a business case on. We don't know how much money we will earn. If we build a new testing environment, how much extra will we earn on that? It's a difficult business case to create. And I remember talking to Michael McGrath, who wrote that book, we had a discussion on how do we create business cases on these long-term strategic bets. I just remember the dinner. He leaned over the table and said, Magnus, you don't. They're a strategic bet. Those are the ticket to play. Period. If you want to become the best, if you want to scale, if you want to take that leadership role, well, that's the ticket that you have to pay. Of course, it has to be an investment, but it's kind of a strategic investment. You don't write, it's very hard to write the business case on a lot of these different things. Here also we need to build a long-lasting team to build the capabilities and the knowledge. It's not a good idea to bring in a lot of consultants or third-party support on your core. It's not a good idea. And we need to protect this slow layer so we don't, by accident, that has happened in some cases. I'll take that in the coffee break if somebody wants to have some stories about how one company lost over $1 million US by not protecting their core. And we must not compromise on that. This is where we place the strategic bet of our company. If you look at on the other side, on the things that need to go very fast, we need to be like, respond very quickly. There's a new customer coming in the door with a lot of money on the table. I want to buy your products. Let's get going. And we will, of course, want to be responsive. We want to adapt. We want to deliver to that customer. But we need to create the rules for that playground. The customer that are coming in the door or the product, they cannot change the core of our product. They have to have a playground to work within. These are the rules for engagements. This is where these are the areas where we can discuss. And the customers normally like that. We want to get like criteria, boundaries, where can we work? This way it can work. Let's develop things in here. And if we then have isolated that space in our platforms, in our products, these are the configurations and adaptations and the things that we can do for you as a certain customer. Wonderful. They will like that and will go faster. Here, if we look at money side, for example, we need to have a payback of that. Fast teams are very short. It's easy to make the calculations. How much are you paying? When are we getting paid? It's like 3 to 6 payback, 3 to 6 months payback normally. So here we have the different rules, financial rules of how to work with the investments in technology and in the organization. The teams here need to have they need to know customers and applications and be really close to the customers today. While the long-term teams, when they think about long-term, they need to anticipate the future. They need to know the needs of the customers in the future. What will the market look like in 3 years from now? What strategic bets what do we believe in? And develop for that. These guys in the sales-driven teams, this kind of more also the product, needs to know very much about the customers. And then also in the mid-layer, this is the mid-layer that I would say that most of us, when we go to product management classes, learn about the SSPM framework, is predominantly around speed layer 2. Predominantly. Here is where we use our regular thinking about product management skills is perfect in this speed layer 2. It's wonderful. We do our road mapping. We learn to do our business cases, how to write our business case, how to make the investments. And we do a lot of opportunity prioritization. So working with these are the 3 different speed layers. If we can identify different speeds in a company and work with that, we can evolve capabilities in that company to deliver great results fast. With speed layer 1, being responsive, doing market adaptation. Speed layer 2 is where we build our marketing, our differentiation in the market. That's normally where all the marketing is being done. It's based on those things in the speed layer 2. And speed layer 3 with mind the core. This is where we create like the core defining technologies and the ability to compete so that we always have that. And we shall, I agree with Naveen, we shall be able to anticipate competitors' move and look at competitors when we also look at the speed layer 3. There's actually quite a lot of things when we start to think about, when we start looking for research and books and methodologies about time perspective. There are actually quite a lot of things that have been written and done around speed. Not just Agile itself, just Zone to Win. Has anybody read Zone to Win, Jeffrey Moore? He talks a lot about different kinds of speeds and how to work with speed in those 4 different zones. We have, for example, 2-speed IT by McKinsey. It's kind of a concept that they started rolling out in 2014. That every single IT product needs to have 2 speeds in that product, one back and one front end. That's simplified. I think it's a little bit too simplified, and maybe we have 3 speeds sometimes. But there are different ways. Let's go to some concrete examples. Let's look at in River, for example. In River, a PIM solution, product information management solution that connects with SAP or Info or Oracle platforms. Maybe not. I think Oracle has its own PIM, right? Okay, and SAP bought the PIM company. Oh, maybe, yeah, okay. But in River, it was just recently was acquired not by 3.6, but by $360 million. They had the problems that they shared, that they had products got in the way of product creation. They had a problem that the projects, when they delivered customer products, they were scoped in the wrong way and they had connected to the core. They had a problem that they were not innovative enough. They had grown. There were like 60 to 100 people employed, and they were innovative in the beginning, and now they kind of lost their innovation, the power to innovate. So what we did is that we created and worked with them to create a little bit of different strategy and structure for the architecture that clearly separated the rules for projects and for the architecture, and we also created a lab to become fast. So we tripled the speed, they evolved the partner channel, and they were sold. If you look at Worldline payment solution, do you know Worldline? It's kind of like, I met with Razorpay, the CPO of Razorpay, and then he said, yeah, of course, Worldline, Worldline and Razorpay are very similar. But Worldline is a very big French provider. They have an acquisition strategy. They buy a lot of companies all the time to gain market share. At the same time, they try to integrate everything in all the products, which is kind of a problem. It's getting strategy, or maybe that's supposed to be strategy. It got in the way for the product strategies, all the acquisitions. You bought a new company, new rules. It was really hard for anybody in the different organizations to work with the product strategies. They had a lot of internal conflicts, and they had it difficult in the different product areas to make strategic bets. Because they were always afraid if they do something, they buy another company tomorrow, and all those investments are down the drain. So in that case, we kind of built a 2-layer approach, and it's kind of almost like skipped layer 2. That we did a fast layer, which is very customized oriented, and a long-term level that is primarily focused on building technologies for the long term. So that we focus on speed layer 1 and speed layer 3. And we can see that the different type of companies in different stages of the life cycle, they focus on different layers of the speed. If you look at startups, focus on speed layer 1 to be fast, and on speed layer 3 to have a vision and a long-term thinking and develop some type of core. While, for example, very grown-up companies, large companies tend to be very speed layer 2 oriented. So here we went and did almost the very opposite. Let's focus on speed layer 1 and speed layer 3. And that resulted both that they introduced the omni-channel and all the return processes for that faster than planned, and they were easier to integrate with merchants, and salespeople got really, really happy. Look at Dolby Atmos that I shared about. They had a problem. They had like they were working with the 3 horizon thinking that always kept horizon 3. It's always like 3 years away. It's always somewhere else. It's never here. It's always somewhere else. And that's a problem when we push strategic thoughts to the future and we're not using them. So, and they had a hard to respond when BBC wanted to solve different things. They couldn't really solve that in their structure, and they work very much. Dolby Atmos is not the standard. They use standards, but it's not the standard. They made it the standard. We made it the standard. We established it to become a standard, a technology standard, by working with the speed layers. Because what we did is that there's a lot of other things that we did as well, but we established one of the things that was a direct result from speed layer approach is that we established kind of exploration teams that allowed Dolby to solve fast problems because they weren't good enough in solving fast problems because they cannot change their product. But we built what we called exploration teams to clean pipelines in the ecosystem. Like, for example, in the ecosystem of sound, there's a pipeline that is dominated by Netflix. If you get Netflix on board, you get the Netflix pipeline. Everybody that interacts with Netflix must use that technology. So we built like these pipelines throughout, and there's multiple pipelines in the ecosystem. So we defined the concept of pipelines and we built the pipeline cleaning, like, what do you call those? Plumbers. We built a plumbing team that cleans the pipelines in the ecosystem. Based on our thinking of speed layers. Sub-radar system, it's just, you can, their problem was that the big customers with big wallets took the ownership of the product strategy. They lost their product vision. And going back once again I loved the talk by Naveen. That was one of the best talks I've ever heard about product thinking and product management. And what he's talked about, he talked to the second point. You remember that about the product vision? You must have a bold and strong product vision, and it's easily taken over. If you have customers with big wallets, your product vision can easily be taken over and you lose it. That happened to Sub-radar system as well. They lost their visionary thinking because the big wallets and the money came to the table and they started dictating what to develop. So thereby defining 3 layers and also the rules of engagement allowed Saab to regain the technology leadership thinking and create space for that area. Don't get driven by those wallets and lose your vision just because there comes money, short-term money. It's a problem. So there are a number of guidelines that you will see when you download this from the get the presentations. There are some exercises that you can think about. What makes you slow? What is the core that you want to build, like the moat that keeps you compete? And what drives you to be fast? What I think about speed layers, and when we've been involved in speed layers at different companies, it's the thing that makes the speed layers kind of the mechanism to create that flywheel that we're all looking for. The flywheels that builds continuous revenues when we invest something and we continue to generate money. The speed layer is a model to achieve the flywheel business. Thank you.
I think I know a lot of people have questions. We are running a little late, but we want to have the questions with the coffee. So, but obviously, mine is going to be around to please ask questions around the session. Amazing session, Magnus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mutter.
Yeah.